really wanted to get into the why behind sex addiction, because I think there's a lot of people who really want to get into good recovery, but they have a hard time really understanding what good recovery is. What was it that actually caused all of this? So I'm going to explain it in a very concise way so that you can, again, use hopefully this podcast episode and this guidance to get into good recovery for yourself. First thing to understand is the brain. Okay, listen, if we're engaging in unwanted behavior, the brain has found value in it, right? That's what the brain does. It collects data and then it makes what it believes is the best decision, right? And so it's kind of crazy to think about that. Like, what's good about sleeping with sex workers, about having an affair, hiding a pornography and masturbation habit from your wife? Why would your brain find value in that? Well, it must have. Right? Because that's what it did. It weighed all the data, including your wife, and it probably said, hey, I know the potential risks with paid sex. I mean, you can go to jail. It's not legal. But your brain has basically said, hey, you know what? It's worth it. It's worth the risk. Right? And so what we have to ask ourselves is why? If our brain is telling us that it's worth it, what is it that's so worth it? That's really the core of the why behind everything that we do. So some examples of this. If you're going to get into good recovery, what you really have to ask yourself is, what would open the door to these behaviors that you're engaging in? So let's kind of look at some of these. Let's start with paid sex, then we'll look at affairs, and then we'll look at pornography. So let's start with paid sex. If somebody is engaging in paid sex, they're giving money to somebody in exchange for some sort of sexual act, what must somebody think for that to be an acceptable practice? It's really gross when you think about it. I participated in paid sex. I'm deeply sorry about all of it. I can't believe I did that, but I did do it, and I did not do it just once. I did it multiple times, right? So if I've engaged in these behaviors, I need to then ask myself, how could I do such a thing, right? What must my brain be thinking for that to be an acceptable decision? I'll speak for myself, and I can kind of include some of the beliefs that we've seen and worldviews that we've seen from other guys in our program. But I think the big one with paid sexual interactions is typically what I've seen is you don't value humanity. You have turned yourself, for at least the guys in my program, they've turned themselves into production machines, right? They get better every single day, right? Everything they do, all of it, from morning to night, it's all about self-improvement, getting better. That sounds so great on the surface, but a lot of the times they're getting better almost as if they are like a tool or like a race car that they're like up and enhancing, right? So on the surface, it looks great. Wow, he's constantly bettering himself and improving himself. But again, he's improving himself like a tool to be more productive, to, again, make more money, do more, be more, climb the ladder faster. So it's not really honoring the humanity inside of the person. That's kind of a whole different discussion. But, humans are not here to make tons and tons and tons of money. I mean, that's just not why we're here. Capitalism is a man-made concept, right? Humans have needs, we have motives, and we have these desires, and they're baked into the side of all of us. And if you pay attention to them, then you go do your self-improvement, it probably will lead you down a really great path, because now you're improving yourself with a reason, right? There's a divine, heart-centered reason for you to get better and better every day. But if you look at most successful, high-achieving men, a lot of the self-improvement they're doing is to, again, become better at making money. They want to be a better tool, not a better human being. So why is this an issue? Well, if you dehumanize yourself and you don't value your own humanity, your own feelings, your own desires, your own aspirations and motives, and you're really not paying attention to the humanity inside of you, then if you don't value humanity inside yourself, I can guarantee you're not going to value it inside of another person. And I think that's what really opens the door to somebody paying someone for sex is, I no longer see this individual. I don't see the humanity in this individual, right? I'm a hammer and everything's a nail, right? So the world's just for me to conquer. And it's a very common, successful male outlook. And again, the challenge with that is it's not just limited to paid sex. If you don't value your own humanity and you just see yourself as this domination machine here to conquer and accomplish, then you're certainly not going to see the humanity in others, which would open up the door to defying women, using women. And we shouldn't even limit it to women. It can be men as well, right? If you don't don't value your own humanity, you might walk into a room and see, all right, hey, what group of people do I need to get to know here to advance my career? So everywhere you go, you're seeing the world through becoming more and conquering more and dominating more and accomplishing more. You're not walking into the room there to just connect with human beings, right? When you walk into that room, you see a hierarchy, right? Oh, these people down at the bottom, they're not worth my time. But those guys at the top, yeah, I need to get to know them. There's value in them. And again, it's all this dehumanization practice, right? And there's obviously tons and tons of other beliefs. I'm just kind of highlighting things so all of you listeners can kind of wrap your head around, all right, what is the belief system and my worldview that led to these behaviors so that I can go through and try and make some of those changes so this doesn't happen again. So now let's talk about like affairs. Somebody's going to have an affair and more or less another relationship outside of their marriage. What would open the door for this? Now, this one's a little hard for me because that wasn't part of my process addiction, but I can speak to it in terms of what I've seen from other men. You know, what I see here usually is these men have trust issues. They typically have self-esteem issues, right? So they don't particularly love who they are. They've been led to believe that who they are currently is actually not enough yet. They need to go do things to get better so that one day they can become a person that they do love. And again, a lot of this is subconscious. I don't think a lot of these guys would say, oh, I don't love myself. I don't think very highly of myself. But I think if you looked at their actions, it would indicate that they don't, right? Because they're obsessed with making themselves better. I'm not good enough the way I am, right? So there's this void of emptiness, of love. I'm not seen. I'm not loved. I'm not cared for. And the truth is, you probably are seen, loved, and cared for. But if you don't see yourself as that yet, hey, I'll love myself when I'm more confident. I'll love myself when I'm a better speaker. I'll love myself when I have a bigger company. I know we don't say these things out loud, but if you look at the actions, it is kind of true. That's that restlessness that a lot of high-achieving men have is, I'll love myself when. And again, we never say that, but it's the energy behind our behavior patterns. So if you're carrying these voids, these very human voids, a lack of love, a lack of respect, a lack of intimacy, I would say most of it's probably your own fault from not really just seeing that you're worthy of that, capable of that, that you're worthy of it now. Again, that's kind of the high achiever's curse, is trying to become someone who deserves it and is worthy of it all. Truth is, you were always deserving and worthy of everything. That other game you're talking about, that's just capitalism. That's a totally different thing. It's got nothing to do with being human. So again, you're walking around with this void. Well, you might have an opportunity or an interaction somewhere with a female. Maybe that interaction feels pretty good. It feels seen. She's complimenting you and you feel respected. You might feel admired. And so there'll be this interaction where all of a sudden you're feeling the opposite of those awful feelings, right? This future affair partner is making you feel some way that you wish you felt at home with your wife. The funny part is you blame your wife for that feeling. It ain't your wife's fault, I can assure you of that. Now, I'm not saying that you may not have some marital stuff to work with back home, some communication things, maybe some sexual issues. Sure, you might. But again, you can find that really meaningful connection even in those hard times with your wife. You don't need to leave your marriage. But it's not what the brain says. The brain says, oh, wow, all this at home sucks. I never feel seen. I never feel admired. I never feel wanted, desired. But now I'm getting it out here. And so again, the worldview is I never feel any of these things and now I'm getting it from this affair partner. And again, once you've had one affair, assuming you get away with it and it stays hidden, it typically turns into another and another and another. Why? Because the brain has found, oh wow, if I'm feeling these voids, I know how to get these met. I had that one affair once and it changed all of this for me. Okay, so that could open a door. And again, there's tons of other reasons why, literally thousands of other beliefs that could lead to having an affair. I'm just sharing these specific examples with you so that you can start, again, correlating what was my belief system, my personal sense of identity, and my worldview that allowed these behaviors to occur, right? That's good recovery, really policing the belief system that led to the behaviors. And then the last one was pornography, right? So what do we see with pornography use? If somebody's going to justify, hey, I'm going to watch porn, I'm going to masturbate, this is normal behavior, this is what guys do. What's the belief system? How does this come about? I would say one of the more common beliefs that I see with porn use is guys latch onto it in a very entitled way. They latch onto it very early and they basically say, hey, it's my sexuality, it's my body, this feels good. Of course, you see on TV, right? You'll see jokes about pornography being hit in Home Alone. He finds his brother's Playboy magazine. You're not unaware that porn is being consumed by men. And again, I would say with pornography, this is probably the most dominated belief is, hey, every guy's doing it. What's the big deal? I'm just doing it all alone on my computer, on my phone. Nobody else is being negatively affected by this. I think a lot of what we see with porn use is it's just a ton of entitlement. I mean, really, when I see guys who really struggle with it and you look at their belief system, their brain just really isn't sold on not doing it. It's still more committed with, this is just really an issue with the church and with my wife. But in the end, the rest of the world doesn't see an issue with this, right? And you got to watch that belief system, because if your brain really just feels like this isn't really that big of a deal, that everybody's doing it, how hard are you actually going to be able to try to stop? If it's truly just an issue with like the church or your wife, but your brain really just doesn't see a reason why we need to stop doing this because everybody else is doing it, can you really get into good recovery? And I know this is confusing, right? Because the real you probably wants to stop. Right? It probably wants to stop. Hey, if I keep doing this, my wife might leave me. But again, we have to be honest. And this is, again, why I recorded this episode. What is your brain saying, though, in those moments? Because I know the real you wants to stop. But if your brain, if most of the data that is collected says, I like doing this, it feels good, it brings me some pleasure, I don't really see what the big deal is, every guy's freaking doing it, there's endless amounts of pornography on the internet, which brain's saying, hey, clearly people like using this because there's so much of it out there. And so what's the driver behind the continual porn use and objectification of women? Let's not even say porn. Let's just say you're in public at the gym and you're staring at women's butts while they're at the gym. Same thing, right? You're just saying, hey, what's the big deal? It's just looking over at her butt. What's wrong with that, right? And I think if the brain at all tries to rationalize the behavior, you have to wonder, are you going to stop? Are you going to ever be able to stop? If truly the only reason you're stopping is because you don't want to get divorced and you don't want to piss off the people at the church, is that really enough for your brain? From what I know about the brain cares about you and only you. Again, we all like to think that the brain cares about your wife. It really doesn't a lot of the time, unfortunately. We think that our brain cares about our kids. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. We give the brain way too much credit. And in the end, it is just an organ that collects data and then tells you what to do or gives you options of different things you could do. And I think if we are not careful around where we got that data in the first place, did you put that data there? Do you actually believe it? Or is this stuff that just got dumped into your head from all of the movies that you watched, the friends that you had in middle school and high school and college, books you read, TV advertising, you name it, all this data coming into your head? You really got to ask yourself, do I actually believe that? Do I want to believe that? Or was that taught to me? Did I learn this somewhere? Because again, we have to ask questions like that, because if we don't, we may not be making decisions based off of this really real world right here in front of us, the actual real world where we're trying to create a life of meaning and a life full of purpose. I'm not trying to hurt ourselves and hurt others. But again, the mind doesn't always think that way. What do I mean in all of this in conclusion? What can you do? Well, first off, anytime that you're looking at any sort of unwanted behavior, you need to become a full-time student around the thoughts that are leading up to it. And sometimes do hypothetical exercises. Ask yourself, hey, what must somebody believe to sleep with a sex worker? Well, they must believe that this person's not a person. They must believe that this person is doing this because they want to do it. They must believe that they are entitled to getting their sexual needs met, and they're entitled to lying and hiding about it. They have to. In order for them to pull the trigger and do such a thing, they must believe, beliefs somewhere in the genre of that, right? So the other thing I'd encourage is, if you're engaging in an unwanted behavior, go through and do some hypothetical exercises on what must somebody believe to be able to do the things that they just did. Now, what's good recovery? Well, good recovery would then be taking that a step further and say, how did I start believing beliefs like that? And then step 3, probably the most important, is, okay, hey, I need to seek out psychological help here. If I don't trust people and I just look to myself to getting my own needs met, what do I do in psychology to change that? If I've dehumanized myself and I don't really see the humanity in myself or others and I can't really honor it, what do I need to do there to start bringing humanity back into the situation? Because to me, bringing humanity back in is one of the fastest ways to kind of put an end to all of this behavior. You have to restart by rehumanizing yourself. But my point is, you go belief by belief by belief, and you have to start asking yourself, how do these get here? Do I want them here? And then more importantly, what do I need to do to change these things so I don't keep believing? Because I think people zoom in way too much on the unwanted sexual behaviors and they miss the whole point. It's not about stopping the sexual stuff. It's not about stopping the porn. I mean, yes, it is. But at the same time, real recovery, right? Sobriety stopping. Real recovery is going all the way back up and saying, what must I believe to be able to engage in those practices? Where did I start believing that? And how do I stop believing it?